Welcome to Harvest Mission Community Church. You are listening to one of our sermons.
So to start off, the question I have today is, have you ever felt uncertain? So raise your hand, because I think all of us have. Have you ever felt uncertain? Okay, you could put it down. So one of the times that I felt most uncertain was when I was moving to Hong Kong. And I'm originally from New York, but I was doing university in the University of Michigan, go blue. Yeah, okay. And then, and then after that, I committed 2 years to staying in Ann Arbor, but then after that, I decided to make this move across the world to a place called Hong Kong. And I know I've shared this before, but I really didn't know what was in Hong Kong. But there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of wondering, like, God, what's going to happen there? How are you going to provide for me? Am I going to be able to have the things I need? Am I going to get married? All these questions piling up. And the reason why I felt I was okay at that point to move forward is because I was only 24. And so I was like, okay, like 24, give 2 years of my life. I still got a large number of time in my life. And so that was me when I was like first in Hong Kong. And I don't know if I look more youthful or not, but that was me. And so there's this uncertainty that I had, this uncertainty of just not knowing what God was going to do. I remember in the midst of that process, one thing that I was doing is just asking God, like, show me your way. Help me to know if you're really leading me to Hong Kong. What are you doing? Why am I going to go to Hong Kong? What's the purpose of everything? And I was watching a TV show called Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Does anyone know that TV show? Okay. So it's part of the Marvel series. And there's a part where this one guy, the whole organization called S.H.I.E.L.D. was corrupt now. The bad guys came in and they took it over. And so after that, these good guys were trying to figure out, okay, where do we go? What are we going to do? And one of the things that was left behind for them is that there was a beeper, I think, and it had some coordinates on it. It had like a couple of numbers. And so this good guy was like, oh, I really believe that this was given to me by our head leader, whose name was Nick Fury, if you don't know. And so they're like, oh, Nick gave us this. But there were other people in that team that was like, you sure about that? Like, are you sure that that's what we're supposed to do and where we're supposed to go? Everything is compromised. Like, why should we follow that? Maybe even Nick Fury is compromised at this point. But then eventually, because he felt like he had this inkling and this understanding that Nick Fury is the one who gave them these coordinates, he decided to go. And actually, it was the place that they were supposed to go. And as I was in that process of trying to figure out, is Hong Kong somewhere I was supposed to go, God used the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So whenever you watch movies or TV shows, make sure that you're also asking God, what do you want to speak to me about? Because he just might do that. But in that process, I was like, okay, God, like, I don't know why you're sending me there, what you're going to do, what is going to be even over there. I had no clue. I had no clue about Hong Kong. But God, because you called me there, I'm going to go. I'm going to go because I firmly believe that you're the one who spoke to me, and that's why I'm going to take the step of faith. And in that uncertainty, I was reminded that God saw me, that God remembered me, that he provided in ways that I never thought before. My journey in the past 10 years of being in Hong Kong has been one of the craziest times, but it has also been one of the most fruitful times of my life, and just being able to experience joy and learning God's heart for me. And so the one thing I have today for us is God sees and remembers those who are faithful. God sees and remembers those who are faithful. And if we remember that just last week, my call for us, the one thing I have for us is faithfully follow Jesus. And we were talking about the how, or maybe just the things that the mindsets in which we should go about in terms of faithfully following Jesus or the call that we have. But today I want to be able to share a little bit of what are the marks of a faithful person and what is the message that God has for the faithful people. And so in Malachi, we've gone through a bunch of disputes that a lot of these Israelites had and God had with the people. They were talking and, God is just like, you have forgotten all these things. And then the people are just like, God, you're messed up. Like, why are these people getting all this good stuff and you're not blessing us? What's the point of following you, God? And God is just like, I'm still faithful. I'm still walking with you. I'm still constantly the same God yesterday, today, and forever. And now we're going to get to a point where you see the faithful remnant, the people who are still faithfully following Jesus or following God at that time and faithfully moving into the things that God has called for them. But there's uncertainty because still the economic situation is still not great. Still the economic or the political situation is they don't have the king that they want. Still a spiritual sense that the temple is still not what they had imagined. And so there's all these uncertainties. And so we're going to pick up there. And so if you turn with me to Malachi chapter 3, verse 16 to 18, I'm going to read it for us here. Then those who feared the Lord spoke with one another. The Lord paid attention and heard them. And the book of remembrance was written before him of those who feared the Lord and esteemed his name. They shall be mine, says the Lord of hosts, in the day when I make up my treasured possession, and I will spare them as a man spares his son who serves him. Then once more you shall see the distinction between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves God and the one who does not serve him. So to begin here, we're going to talk about the mark of the faithful. What are some distinctives? What are the things that are different about the faithful people compared to the rest of the people? And so one of the things that I want to first put before us is that if you look at many commentaries, they'll call these people who are fearing God, they will call them the remnant faithful or the faithful remnant. And they were the people who still obey God, as I have mentioned. But the distinction of those who were serving God out of external compliance. And so a lot of the Israelites, they were doing things because they were trying to get something from God. Hey, if I follow God, obey God, there should be some kind of blessing for me. And that was their full mindset. But the difference and the distinctive for the faithful remnant was that they actually, out of their relationship with God, out of knowing who God is, they were able to follow and obey and trust and continue to walk in what God had for them. So the first mark of the faithful was that they feared the Lord, that they feared the Lord. You see that clearly in verse 16, that we see that they are the people who feared the Lord. And I wanted to address first how fearing anything outside of God will cause us not to fear or revere God, that they are in complete opposites of each other. If you fear anything other than God, then you are not fearing God. And you will make decisions, you will make life choices, you will go about your life and live your life in such a way that doesn't fear God. And a common adage or saying within Christian circles is that you worship what you fear. What we fear is what we worship. Another way to put this is there's a theologian and a Christian pastor by the name of Oswald Chambers. He has a very good book called The Utmost for His Highest. It's a devotional, and if you have a chance, you should grab that and just read it one day at a time. There's a lot of profound truths that Oswald Chambers says. But he said once, and quote, "The remarkable thing about fearing God is that when you fear God, you fear nothing else. Whereas if you do not fear God, you fear everything else." And so it's this idea that if we don't fear God, then there's going to be so many other things that we will fear. But if we do fear God, then those fears will be dispelled because you'll be able to understand that God is good, that God is trustworthy, that God will provide, that God is powerful. And I was thinking about this idea of fear because the fear of God is a little bit different than what we would imagine of the fear of a spider, right? Like the fear that instills within us when we have certain anxieties about different things, right? Like it's a different type of fear. And one time I went to a Knicks game, and if you don't know by now, the Knicks are my favorite team, and they just won today. Praise the Lord. So I went to this game, and they had a player, and he was about like 7'2". And so he's like huge, right? I think if he were to stand on stage, he could probably just touch that foam up there very easily. But he was 7'2". He's like a beast of a man. It was like crazy to see him in front of me physically. But I had the privilege and the honor of being able to sit right by the tunnel. And so every halftime or different moments, they'll go in there, and that's where they're coming out from, or that's where they're going back in. And so I had the privilege of sitting there. I was really thankful for that because my friend invited me to this game. And I went towards the tunnel where they're coming out, and then I went to, clap all of their hands. I was like, I got to do this. And this was during Linsanity, if anybody knows. Like, it was a huge deal. And I was like, I got to touch Jeremy Lin's hand. I will never sell this hand. I will never wash it for the rest of my life. But I got to touch this 7'2" giant's hand. And literally, his hand was probably that large, like two of my hands in one. And it occurred to me, if I were to pick a fight with him, wow, like one of that, there is fear in that, but there's almost a reverence, because I was just like, man, you are just a different human being. Like, are we even the same breed, right? But I looked at him and I was just like, wow, like there is almost a sense of awe because he's just so like great at basketball, but on top of that, he was just a different person altogether. Like, I don't think I've seen a 7'2" person in Asia, but it was just amazing. And I was just thinking, man, like that sense of reverence, that sense of awe that I had when I saw this player, like God is that much infinitely more. And I know this is a very interesting example because normally people would say something like, when I went to the Grand Canyon, I was sitting on the edge, I was reminded of how small I am. But this was another perspective I had where even with another human being, you could have this sense of reverence, a sense of awe. And in that same way, that's how we are to fear the Lord in being able to revere him, to be in awe of him, to be able to see that God is this powerful God, that he is the creator of the universe, and to be able to stand in front of him is a privilege. It is an honor. It is something that we don't deserve, but God in his infinite love and grace allows us. In Proverbs 29:25, it says, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Now, I was thinking about that word fear and whatever came after it. In here, it says fear of man. But what could we fear? What are some different things in our lives that we could fear? And these are generalizations to help us to have categories of what we could understand to be what we could fear. So there's fear of man, there's fear of death, or the desire to be safe, the fear of the unknown, or you could say the fear of future, the fear of failure, and the fear of being forsaken, or the fear of being left alone and being alone. So these are 5 fears that many of us have faced in our lives. These are fears that I have on a daily basis almost. But I was thinking in Proverbs 29:25, you could put in any of these fears, but always be reminded that if I trust in the Lord, I am safe. If I trust in the Lord, there's security. If I trust in the Lord, then nothing can stand against me. And I'm wondering for how many of us that fear drives us, The fear is the very thing that leads you to make every decision in your life. Maybe it's the fear of man, it's the fear of people. And so whenever someone doesn't like you, you start doing things to gain their approval. You start doing things so that they would be able to say, hey, you're my friend. Because in that we find some kind of security. We find this level of being able to be known and to have significance in people's lives. And so there's a fear of man that could drive some of us. Fear of death. That is safety our biggest concern whenever we make decisions. If God asks us to go somewhere and he is calling us and we know that call is very clear, are we willing to take that step and not live out of the fear of death? And we know that the gospel answers this question for us, that death has no sting. It says that in 1 Corinthians. And being able to know that we don't have to fear death anymore. But how many of us make those decisions to live out of a fear of death? For some of us, it's the fear of the unknown. And so now you're a control freak. You're trying to put everything together. I got to get a 4.0 GPA, got that internship, get another internship the next year, and then never give up one of my summers to be able to go on missions because I just want to keep doing internships to secure my future. But can we trust that God, in all of that he's going to provide? And if I obey, if I follow God, if I trust in the Lord, that I am going to be safe, that he is going to provide, that there's going to be security for you and I. But oftentimes that desire for control comes out of, I don't know what's going to happen, so I got to control what's in front of me. What can I do? For some of us, it's in how we interact with our children. For some of us, it's in the workplace and how you interact with your boss. Like, we're trying to find whatever we could to be able to control the different areas of our lives. Next is the fear of failure. And so you're not willing to risk anything, take a step of faith. That if I fail, what's going to happen to me? There are those questions of, I don't want to fail. If I'm a failure, if I try to take this option and decision in my life to move forward in this way, and I feel like God has called me, but what if I'm wrong? Then it paralyzes you. It makes you wonder, should I have made that decision? And oftentimes we won't even get to that point. And there's a fear of failure. And this is something that I feel is very prominent and prevalent within Asia. That getting that one bad mark, it crushes us because now we failed one thing and we feel like our lives are over. But how do we live with the understanding that God's got our back? That one grade is not going to define us. One mistake in our life is not going to define us. One little mishap is not going to define us. And we don't have to be crippled by the fear of failure. And we could walk in faith. And then fear of being forsaken, fear of being alone. A lot of us in this room looking good, but still single, right? Sorry, okay. Let's reel it in. We're reeling it in. But some of us, at the first sign of someone talking to us or showing a little bit of interest, now we're latching onto that. And we're making our whole lives about that. Because we don't want to be alone in our lives. We don't want to feel that in our lives. And there's that fear of being alone. And so we try to strive or look for relationships. Or we can't be ourselves around people because what if they leave me too? What if they abandon me? What if that situation that happened with my family where my mom walked out on me or didn't love me for whatever reason? What if that situation with my dad when he abandoned me in the most darkest times of my life? We don't want that feeling. And so we'll do whatever we can to please, to make sure that that relationship, or we could have a certain relationship in our lives because it's through that relationship we feel fulfilled. But can we walk in faith? Can we walk not because of fear, not because of this? These are the things that cripple us and we're constantly thinking about, but can we trust in God, fear God and Him alone, and to walk in faith to the things that God has for us? The second mark of a faithful person was they were heard by God. And God paid attention to them. I thought that was amazing. I was just like, wow. Like, if you read that verse 16, there were the faithful that were talking to each other, the people who feared the Lord, they were talking to each other. And it says God paid attention to them. God heard them. But first, I want us to think about this conversation that was happening. I was wondering, like, what were they talking about? Were they siding now with the people who had went against God? They're like, oh, maybe we should just join them. What are they doing with each other? What are they talking about? We know the previous conversation is that the Israelites or the bulk or the majority of people, they were like, I'm not gonna, God, is He worth following? Maybe not, probably not. And they were just seeking things from God. But then now you see this faithful remnant and they're talking to each other. And I was reading some things about this, and some people say that this conversation served as a protective and strengthening function for the faithful remnant. That they were encouraging each other, that they were looking at everything around them, and of course, they were scared too. They were scared, what's going to happen to me? Is my family going to be able to move on and move forward? Are we going to be protected? What's going to happen, God? Or they were probably getting those ideas in their head. And they were being influenced by the people who were saying, yeah, let's stop following God. Like, God's not worth it. Let's stop it. But they huddled together, they came together, and they said, let's encourage each other. Let's point each other back to God. Let's help one another obey God. Let's use these times and community times for us to be protected and strengthened in our faith. And I'm wondering for how many of us, when we go through a difficult time, the only utterances and the things that we say are complaints. How many of us, when we go through difficulties, it's being able to find a group of people that will have a pity party with you. I can't believe she said that. Yeah, she's so bad. Yeah, you're right. Let's get her back. Like those are the types of talk we have sometimes. Can imagine in our workplace circles, there's that one person that you don't like that feels like they're climbing the corporate ladder. Like, oh, let's get back at that person. But how do we become a group of people? That's why we have life groups, that as we come together, we could encourage each other, that we could speak life to each other. When someone is speaking bad about someone, you could stand up and say, hey, brother, hey, sister, I don't think you should be saying that. You're not being drawn to the things of God. You're being drawn away from God. And sometimes it's so easy. The world has these conversations where it's more negative. For some reason, negativity is like the best place to be. And you just soak in that negativity. You talk to each other. You say things that are harmful. But can we be a community of people? Can you have friends? Can you ask friends to keep you accountable and say, hey, I know that this is my mindset. I know that sometimes I move towards this direction of saying negative, harmful things. But let's be a community that says, let's love one another, point each other back to Christ. And the Lord hears the righteous. That these faithful remnant, as they're having this conversation, they're talking, that God is in the midst of them. that he's present with them. In Proverbs 15, verse 29, it says, "The Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous." Sorry, I didn't let you all share it with me on that. Let's do that together. You could say the yellow section with me. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. That he hears the prayers of the righteous. That for you and I, as we go to God, that he's hearing us. The next verse I want us to look at is a verse where the context is that this man was just healed of his blindness, and the Pharisees were asking his family, like, "Hey, like, what's going on with, your son? Like, what happened with him?" And then they're like, "Oh, we don't want to deal with you. Why don't you just go talk to my son?" And so when they approach the son, and the son responds in John chapter 9, verse 31, "We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him." And so for the faithful remnant, and we see it play out in that context, but God listens to us. That if we're able to walk faithfully, if we're keeping to the things that God has for us, if we obey God, that he will be faithful to listen. The third thing is a mark of the faithful is esteemed his name. This is paired up with fearing the Lord, and then it says, "and esteemed his name." In verse 16, we see that the faithful not only feared God, but they also honored him, esteemed him, made much of his name. There's other ways to understand esteem, and those ways are honor. If you look at the original language, honor, to meditate, value, regard. And this is the way that these faithful remnant were viewing God. And in how they lived their lives was showcasing that they cared about God's name. We learned back in Malachi chapter 2, I believe, we learned about how God was faithful to his name. But he also calls us to be faithful to his name, that we're his ambassadors, that we're able to honor, to meditate, to value, to regard his name. How do we live our lives? If someone saw you, would they say that that is a faithful remnant of Jesus Christ? Would they be able to say that that is a follower of Christ? Or would they say, they're not that much different? They cheat on exams the same way that someone who doesn't believe in Jesus would. They get ahead in work or cut corners so that they could look better. They raise their kids just the way that any other family would, instilling values into them that are not distinct of Christian values, but it's just the same as everybody else. How do we live our lives? Do we live it trying to honor God's name? Do we try to meditate and understand who God is? Do we value him? Do we regard him as the highest thing in our lives? This is the mark of the faithful. I pray that at HMCC, we would be people who, when people look at us, when outsiders look at us, when we're interacting with our colleagues, when we're interacting with our schoolmates, when we're interacting with our pre-Christian family members, that they would be able to say, wow, those people, there's something different. That their lives have been transformed, because I knew them before Jesus, but now they're looking kind of different. There's something distinct about them and how they live their lives. It's much more than just going to a religious service on a Sunday, but their whole lives are marked by this understanding of serving the King above all kings. They care about their God. Their God makes a difference in their lives. And I would say one thing that the Muslims get better than us is that they esteem God. You can't make fun of God's word. If you say something against it, they're willing to die for their faith. And they're willing to go above and beyond. And they know that what it is to practice their faith in such a way that people and their families and everyone around them would know that they highly regard their God. But if we say we believe in the true God, if we believe and we say that that Jesus Christ rose again from the dead, then is that what people are saying about us? That it makes a difference. And the last mark is righteous and serves God. I just clumped it together. But in verse 18, we see that the faithful are righteous and serve God, and a clear distinction is made between the faithful and those who are wicked and do not serve God. That are we able to live in such a way where everything that we do is in the service of God? And this is probably connected to esteeming his name. But even in the ways that maybe we serve, maybe it's more about us than God. And that's why we find it tiresome. That's why we don't find any joy. That's why when we have to get up early in the morning, we can't be excited for it. Because it's more about us, that I got to do my religious duty, or I got to do this, I got to do that. But will people be able to say that these people are righteous and not wicked? That they're generous and not stingy? That they love rather than hate? That they're willing to forgive quickly rather than holding on to bitterness? Are we able to observe within our own lives that there is a distinction between us and those who do not follow God? And what makes us uniquely different? And would your friends, family, anyone else you interact with be able to tell the difference? For myself, I know that there is, in all four of these areas, if you ask me this past week, like, okay, Peter, did you fear God? Maybe 1 out of 7 days. Were you righteous and served God? I guess everything that I do is serving God, but I know that in my heart, I make it about myself sometimes. Do I esteem his name? I don't know, like when I don't get recognition, how do I feel? Maybe sad sometimes. And I know as I lead this church, as I'm on this pastor intern journey, there's a lot of moments where it's hard, it's difficult, it's painful. I'm like, God, I don't want to fear your name. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And there's that aspect of, who am I doing it for? What is the purpose of all of this? And this is where I want to talk about why it's so important to have community too. Even with the directors, Joanna, Kieran, and Carissa, just being able to commune with them, just feel like they've been able to encourage me and spur me on. They're able to speak to me in truth and point me back to Christ, but also know to walk with me through this process. Even with my wife, just faithfully praying and helping me and encouraging me whenever I'm going into a hard season or there's something difficult that came up. And I know that this mark of being the faithful is going to be very difficult for many of us. Like, how can we fear God's name all the time? How do we live in such a way that's always righteous? How do we constantly serve? But those are the marks of the faithful, that we, the people, look at our lives and say that, do we have the marks of the faithful? Will people say that we fear God and God alone? Will people know that God listens to us? Would they see that in everything that we do, we esteem the name of Jesus? Would they see that we are righteous in how we serve and live our lives? I will urge us to have those people who can encourage you in this walk. That's not easy. That it's not something that we could just overcome all our sins and struggles. But as faithfully people walk with you in this process, that's going to help us. And they're going to spur us on to continue to follow and continue to be the faithful. My second point is the message to the faithful. The message to the faithful. So what is God's message to the faithful? What does God want to tell them? What does God want to speak to them? And he shares very clear words with them from verses 16 to 18. He says, first, he will remember the deeds of those who fear him. He will remember their deeds. So the book of remembrance was not a book of people's names. They didn't write down people's names. Like, it wasn't just, Peter, Bob, Kelly. If those are your names, I don't mean to call you out. Like, it's not a list of names. The book of remembrance is not a list of names. But actually, it comes from practices that were done during those days, where the king, he would write down the deeds of those people who did well for him, that did good. You see this in Esther chapter 6, when the prince or the king of Persia brings out a remembrance book and remembers all that Mordecai did. And so how does that speak to us? It wasn't written for God, because God, I don't know if you know this, but he's all-knowing. And so he knows your name. Don't worry. He knows how many hairs are on your head. He doesn't need to write this in a book of remembrance. But he did it for the people so that they could know that God remembers the deeds that they did. He did it for the people because it felt like for the people that they had failed, that they had not obeyed God, that they didn't do certain things that they were supposed to, or maybe they felt like God forgotten them. But in the book of remembrance, the whole point is to show the faithful remnant, hey, I remember all that you've done. That don't worry, there's going to be a time that's coming where you will be recognized for these things. Don't count it as meaningless work, but there is purpose, there is a reason. The things that you are doing right now are good things. Continue, persevere. And for them, that spoke directly into this fear of failure, because they were looking all around them. Economically, it sucked. Can I say that word in church? Yes, okay. Politically, it was bad. Spiritually, it wasn't good. It spoke directly because those were the outer signs that showed everybody, oh, maybe these Israelites failed in some way. Maybe the faithful remnant failed in some way. And that's why this is the repercussions and this is what's happening. But no, God says, I remember everything that you've done. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 to 21, and this is a verse that I want to share with us to encourage us. It says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And for these faithful remnant, maybe they didn't see the culmination of all their obedience to this wonderful temple, and they were now able to experience a king that they wanted, and they didn't experience all the flourishment of an economy that would bolster and help their generations after. But in Matthew 6, we know that our treasure should not be on this earth. That God is reminding us that don't store up things on this earth, because in 50 years' time, whatever iPhone you have is going to be it won't matter anymore. Don't store up treasures here on earth, because that's going to rust and go away. And I know we've shared this a lot in our church, but a lot of rich people, what they do now is that they buy buildings, right? And then they put their name on the building. It was funny because recently someone saw a name of a building that was my name. And I was like, that's my building. Peter Building. What a best name in the world. But they knew everything else would fade away. But if I could just have my name on a plaque somewhere and it says my name, and that could last a little bit longer, they want to live for that legacy. But for us, we know that that's all futile. That's nothing. We know that there's treasures in heaven. We know that God is going to give us the reward in which we have labored for on this earth to make much of his name. But with this whole book of remembrance, it just reminded me of how, like when I was in kindergarten, you would get stickers for doing good things. It's just like maybe that's how God views, it's sort of this component. But he's remembering. Like every time you got that sticker, it was like one step closer to a prize. But God is just trying to help his people to remember, hey, that good thing that you did is going to be remembered. It's going to be something that doesn't just go away. Don't worry. The second message to the faithful is he will claim them as his chosen, treasured possession. In verse 17, God speaks to the faithful about how they will be his and his treasured possession. And this speaks to the identity that the faithful have, a special relationship with God. Do you believe that for yourself? That you have a special relationship with God now? In 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, right? We all know this, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people, okay, let's say that together, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Every one of us, I believe, in here have something that we value in this life. Maybe it's a computer, or maybe it's a family member, or maybe it's that special someone, or maybe it's a blanket that you got when you were a little kid. You all value something. And what we would do or how we would react if something happened to that valuable, we'll be devastated if we lost it, or if it's a person. Well, I guess you could lose people in your life too. But what would we do for things we value in our lives? Like us humans, we know that we'll go to the ends of the earth for certain valuables that we have. So if God is telling you that you are his treasured possession and he cares about you, he values you, then you better believe it. And he's going to go to the ends of the earth to love you, to care for you. That if you're that one sheep that has gone away, that he loves you so much because you're his treasured possession, that he's going to leave the 99 and find you. And this completely destroys the fear of man, because if you know the love of God, you know how good he is, you know how great he is, then you're going to remind yourself that, man, like I don't need for people to love me. Yes, it's important that we're in community. It's important that we love one another, and through that, we show the love of Christ to others. But it doesn't, I'm not seeking that. I'm not fearful of losing someone in my life. But I know I have this love from God, and through that love, I could live not fearing man, but fearing God. And for that valuable in our lives, we cherish it, we love it, and it's known by us deeply. Even with that little blanket, right? Like you probably have gone through so many seasons with it, and the smell of it, that little stain that was put there when you were 8 years old. When you first brought it over university and you were able to have it by your side. Or even for people. Well, okay, I shouldn't say even for, but for people that are in our lives that we value. We know them, we cherish them, we love them. And as people, even though our love is probably conditional love, that we could only love to a certain extent, but we would forgive and accept these people if they've done wrong to us. That even parental love, it is conditional at times, but in that parental love that we're able to forgive our child because we love our child. We're able to accept them fully for who they are because they are our child. So God looks at each and every one of us, and we're cherished, we're loved, we're known, that we're forgiven, we're accepted. That those are the identities you can carry, and you can move through your life and be confident in that identity. And lastly, the message that God gives is He will spare those that are His own. In verse 17, you see that God says that He will spare them. This was in accordance with having to deal with the wicked and the ones who do not serve Him in verse 18. So we know that there's going to be God's wrath that's going to be poured out on the people, but He tells His faithful remnant that you will be spared because you are my treasured possession, and I'm not going to put my wrath upon you. That it seemed like punishment was on the way for these people because everything around them, the context in what they lived in, revealed that maybe God is punishing us. But no, God said, I will spare you. And this is the assurance of salvation for us, the faithful, the remnant. For us as Christ followers, that we don't have to fear death anymore. And this assurance of salvation is something that God is telling us as His faithful people. So for us, are we able to be aware that God is looking at us and He sees us, He acknowledges us, He remembers us, He knows all the pain and toil that you're going through, that as you're serving in different capacities, as it feels like it's a lonely journey, that God is with us? Can we claim the identity that God has given to us? That we are forgiven, that we are loved, that we are accepted, that we are cherished, that we are known. That identity is there for you and I. And that we could have assurance of salvation. That if someone were to look us dead on the eye, hey, Peter, you think you're going to go to heaven tonight if you die? I could say with confidence, 100% assurance, without a shadow of a doubt, that I will, because God said it. And this is the gospel. That many of us, do we see ourselves carrying the mark of the faithful? And the mark of the faithful is not to just checklist off these things. Okay, I feared the Lord. I esteemed his name. I was righteous. I'm heard by God. But the mark of the faithful for us as believers of Christ is that Jesus' blood is the mark on our lives. And that's why God will look at you one day and say, you are faithful. Not because of what you could do or amount to, and you don't receive any of these things that I just talked about. You don't receive the acknowledgement of the good that you've done, because we know that the good that we do, God looks at it and it's just dirty rags if that's what we're going based off. That we could have this identity and we could be confident in our identity because Jesus' blood is over our lives. And we could be confident in the salvation because Jesus' blood is over our lives. And one thing I was just convicted of is I'm wondering how many of us in this room live according to our works. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 21 to 23, it says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name?' And then will I declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" That what would be our cry on that day? Will we say, "Lord, Lord, did we not go to every Sunday celebration? Did we not go to life group every week? Did we not try to do our best in serving you? Didn't I join the ministry team? Didn't I raise up my family in the ways that you wanted me to?" What would be our plea with God? And if it's anything apart from the blood of Christ, then we would be foolish. But I realize that if we understand this grace, if we understand the forgiveness we have, if we understand what Christ has really done for us, then we would live out those marks of the faithful, that we would fear his name, because we realize that apart from God's grace, we would deserve his wrath. That he would hear us because now I am righteous in front of God. And now because of the blood of Christ, I could commune with him. That now I want to esteem his name, make much of it, honor, highly regard him as the chief thing in my life because I know the price he had paid for me. That I would be righteous and serve, not for my own sake or building up my own little kingdom, but because God is worthy, because he has given his best to me. And there's so many stories in my life of just God's faithfulness, God's continual reminder to me that he's walking with me. And I realize whenever I try to focus in on the works that I do, it causes me anxiety. It causes me insecurity. I feel helpless and hopeless. But it's when I look my eyes to the author and perfecter of my faith that he has been faithful before time, and the blood of Christ has covered and washed me clean. And now I can live in a way that is aligned to what he has for me. So the one thing again is God sees and remembers those who are faithful. God sees and remembers those who are faithful. The first next step I have for us is remember God's faithfulness to you. And I know that at the start of this sermon series too, I made it a point, let's remember, let's remember, let's remember. But I could make a guess in this room how many of us probably forgotten. Instead of remember, it's like, I forgot. That's why I want to urge us constantly, remember God's faithfulness to you. Second is read God's letter to you. And this is one way that you could look at the Bible. I'm not saying that it should be the only way you should look at the Bible. But what if someone you loved left a letter for you, and that was the last thing that they gave to you? Would you not treasure that? Would you not want to read it? Would you not want to hear from that person daily? Read God's love letter to you, the Bible. It's a story of just God's love for us. But more than that, it's about his glory and his goodness. It's nothing new. But as we are at this end of the year, I'm just reminded that for many of us, we might have forgotten to commit to reading the Word. Maybe life got a little bit too busy. Maybe we just didn't feel like it at moments. Maybe we were looking for this aspect of feeling fulfilled outside of God's love for us. Let's read God's love letter. Lastly, recommit to making much of Jesus. I would just say take one step of committing more to following Jesus. Maybe that means that you just write one step of faith you're going to take. Maybe that means that it's going to be you actually following through on the application of soap. Yeah, I know, because I don't do that, I write an application, it sounds really good, but then I look back 10 days later, I'm like, I didn't do that. But find one way to recommit to making much of Jesus.
Thank you for listening to the Harvest Mission Community Church podcast. For more information, visit our website at hongkong.hmcc.net.